My name is Gregory Mcdade. I'm counsel for the Agriculture Coalition. Let me just start with a few questions around timing and government response. Probably Mr. Stephen and Dr. Claude, these are questions for you. As I understand it, Dr. Kabenji discovered the first positive results in the 48 salmon he tested on October 15th, 2011, and reported it to CFIA on that date. Is that correct?
Yes, he did report it to the CFIA on October 15th. In subsequent emails, we discovered that he actually had initial positive tests on October the 9th that he did report to the client.
Right, so the government's first awareness of this was October 14th. Mr. Stephen was
October 15th.
October 15th. Was DFO aware of it at that time?
No, and I wouldn't expect to be. CFIA is the organization that was supposed to be receiving notifications.
So when did DFO first find out about these positive results?
On Monday, the 17th of October.
When there was a press conference by Dr. Rutledge and SFU?
I don't know about that.
Dr. Claude, did you do anything around the fact that there is now a positive test from the OIE reference laboratory indicating that ISVv may be present in wild salmon? What did you make any public statements? Did you notify anybody? And not by you, I mean the CFIA.
Yes, initially we had an internal meeting, and I also talked to Dr. Kabengi to find out his opinion of the results and whether he thought they could actually be false positives. We had a meeting to outline how we were going to proceed on this investigation, and as part of that meeting, we determined we needed to assess whether we should notify the OIE and whether and then who are our major trading partners for wild salmon in BC and for farm salmon, and notify our specific trading partners, and we also that purchase that we export our salmon to. And we also notified we prepared to notify the CVOs of the various provinces and representatives of the Canadian Council of Agriculture and Fishery Ministers in Canada.
Let me just take you back to this. You said you had a meeting to determine whether you were going to do those things. May I suggest to you that you didn't do any of those things until after this was made public on October 17th?
I have to disagree. Well, I can't point to the exact time when that news report came out, but we had started our disease response and had some initial meetings in deciding how we were going to proceed.
Between the 15th and the 17th, you've done that?
It was on the morning of the 17th.
When you talked to Dr. Kabenji, he told you that in his opinion these were positives.
I asked him in terms of what his cutoff points were for positive results, and he provided those for me, and he thought they were positive. What he didn't provide was the fact that those results were not repeatable.
He didn't tell you that. He just told you they were positive.
Yeah.
So in your view, as of October 15th, following your conversation with Dr. Kabenji, you had verifiable positive results.
We did not have verifiable positive results. We had a positive test result.
And you had no reason to at that point, you had no reason to believe there was anything wrong with it at all.
Ashley, we were very suspicious because number one, it was identified in a species that we had never seen it before. So we didn't expect a prevalence of 4%, which is what he got as 2 out of 50 being tested positive. So we were already wondering if the results were actually true positives.
But there was nothing you learned from Dr. Kabenji that would support that. As far as he was concerned, these were clear positives, and that's all you knew at that point.
On October the 17th.
Yes.
Yes, October 17th.
Now, can I suggest to you that CFIA would not have gone public with these results if Dr. Routledge at SFU had not?
Well, we didn't go public with the results right away either. We started our investigation, and I believe we went public. I can't remember exactly when we did our first public notice, but we did notify our trading partners, and we did notify governments in Canada.
You would not have gone public for many months if this had not been reported in the media, would you?
I can't answer to that.
You can't say.
No.
I'd like to answer that, please. I've been working in regulatory reporting and surveillance for 20 years here in Canada. Fish inspection, marine toxin monitoring was my responsibility here, both at Fisheries and Oceans and the CFIA. I've also been responsible for drug residue testing, environmental contaminants testing, and most recently from our laboratory side of this program on aquatic animal health. The government of Canada does not routinely report presumptive or preliminary results until we can confirm those results.
So the answer to that is, Mr. Stephen, is you would not have gone public either at DFO.
It would be CFIA's responsibility to do the reporting, but again, we do not report presumptive results. We have to confirm those results first.
And that can take months. Is that right?
It's possible.
Well, and Dr. Clottens, as I understood your testimony on Friday, there was no way that these samples could ever be confirmed because you had chain of custody issues.
Correct.
So these would never have been more than presumptive positives no matter what.
This particular event, yes.
So the Canadian public would not have known about this but for SFU.
At some point, we do report on our investigations, but it is possible the Canadian public would not have known.
And if a new disease came forward, something like HSMI, discovered by a researcher at a university, the same result would occur at CFIA. Is that a fair statement? No one would ever know until you could do confirmatory testing yourself.
That particular disease is not a reportable disease. It would be possibly a new emerging disease that is not, it's not notifiable to CFIA, and whether we would do any more investigation on that disease would depend on the degree of mortality and how many fish populations were being affected.
Mr. Stephen, what is DFO doing about the report of HSMI in the Clayoquot Sound Fish Farm?
I'm not aware of DFO doing anything at the moment. I only learned of Dr. Miller's results when she forwarded them to the Commission on last Tuesday. I have not had any communication with anybody based on that disease at the moment.
So it's now been almost a week and there's nothing at all happening at DFO.
I didn't say that. I said I wasn't aware of anything being done. I'm here, sir.
All right, let's move on in the timeline. So October 17th, there was a press release, and that caused some action. My understanding is that there was a second set of samples that Dr. Kabenji reported to CFIA, and these were actually fish from the Fraser River system, the Weaver Creek and Harrison Mills fish, and that report took place on October 20th. Is that correct, Dr. Clemens?
No, it is not. He actually informed us on the afternoon of October 17th that he had received samples from that area.
So you knew as of October 17th he was testing. When did you know that he was getting positive results from those?
On October the 20th.
Right. So he issued you a written report that he had positive results on October 20th?
No, he did not. He provided a verbal report.
All right. So as of October 21st, CFIA was aware that there were positive tests for ISVv in the Fraser River system. That's correct?
Well, we identified, he gave us the impression that they were from Weaver Creek, and we needed to contact the submitter of the samples to confirm the location.
And that was Dr. Morton.
Yes.
And so can I have Exhibit 28 up on the screen? Now this is a statement from DFO, Mr. Stephen. You were aware at the time that this statement was issued that there had been positive tests found in the Fraser River system?
I was aware that preliminary results had indicated there was, I say yes.
Why is there no mention in this DFO statement about the Fraser River fish?
Because we do not report, as I mentioned earlier, preliminary results. The results have to be confirmed through our National Reference Laboratory. And my understanding as of this date, none of those tests, and as of this date today, none of those tests have ever been confirmed from our National Reference Laboratory.
But this was a statement about 48 fish that were in exactly the same situation, presumptive positives, unconfirmed. So you were prepared to talk to the public about those 48, but you didn't mention a word about the Fraser River fish. Why not?
Because we had completed our analysis of these samples. We were requiring the analysis of those samples because those were made public. Yes, but we didn't make them public. We would not report on any presumptive positives.
I suggest, well, let me go back. When Dr. Kabenji reported to you the positive tests, Dr. Clouth, did you tell him not to issue a report to Dr. Miller? For Morton, sorry.
No, I did not.
He didn't report his results to the person who'd submitted his tests for over a week. Are you aware of that?
Well, it's up to him to decide when he's going to report to his client. And I don't know how long it takes him to complete his testing and then issue his report.
Are you saying that you didn't discourage him from doing it?
No.
Mr. Stephen, the reports on October 17th caused a great deal of public interest in the question of ISVv. And is that correct?
I would agree based on the media that it did, yes.
And this didn't change your decision not to report the Fraser River results at all?
CFIA is responsible for the investigation of reportable diseases in Canada. We assist them in providing a laboratory diagnostic confirmation of any of those suspected positives.
Can I have Exhibit 2089 up on the screen? This was on November 9th, both the Federal Minister of Fisheries and the BC Minister of Agriculture issued a joint statement. You were involved in that, weren't you, Mr. Stephen?
Provided some input in the document, yes.
And you were briefing the minister's office in terms of what was happening in this investigation?
I was at times, yes.
And did you advise the minister's office that that there were positive results for the Fraser River?
The Minister's office was advised that there were presumptive results on all the tests that we were aware of.
So when this, we highlight the third or the fourth and fifth paragraph of these? So when the federal minister and the provincial minister were issuing this report to the Canadian public, your minister at least was aware that ISVv had been found in the Fraser River.
I repeat that presumptive results were available to us, and we were continuing with our testing to try and confirm those results.
And when the provincial minister referred to reckless allegations, he was aware that the OIE office had found positive results in at least 2 sets of salmon.
I can't speak to what the provincial minister had to say or did have any knowledge of.
Well, you'd seen this press release before it was released, hadn't you?
I've seen a version of it, yes.
So that would be a pretty misleading statement, reckless allegations, wouldn't it?
I can't speak to that. As I said, I had no input into the Minister McRae's comments here.
All right, can we have Exhibit 2029 on the screen? You saw this, Mr. Stephen, you were aware of this statement before it was released?
I saw a version of it, yes.
Dr. Clottens, you saw a version of it?
Yes, a version of it.
In the fourth paragraph, it says the DFO has tested all 48 samples and the results are all negative for the virus. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Stephen?
I think Dr. Wright might be able to provide a better answer to that than I.
Well, before Dr. Wright answers, I want to know what your view is.
I was advised by our laboratory that yes, that was a correct statement.
That's Nellie Gagne's laboratory.
That's correct.
Now, you heard her testify, didn't you?
I did.
And you heard her testify that her statements were not negative, they were inconclusive because there wasn't enough RNA present to be able to make a conclusive statement. Isn't that right?
I'm not sure I recall that exactly. No, I heard a lot of testimony a day and a half.
Let me suggest to you that she agreed that without some qualification, that would be misleading. Qualification being that the results were too degraded to be able to test. Before you answer, Dr. Clottens, I want Mr. Stevens' answer on this.
Repeat the question, please.
I understood her evidence to be that the samples were so degraded that she couldn't say that they were negative, that they were inconclusive, and further that she would have expected a statement to that effect in the release, otherwise it would be misleading. What's your view of that?
My understanding from the information I was provided that those samples were negative.
You didn't know that they were inconclusive?
I knew that some samples were inconclusive based on degradation of other materials, the 299 fish that were collected from Dr. Rutledge, but I wasn't aware that these particular ones were degraded to that level. No.
The next statement says the results are consistent with the finding of an independent laboratory in Norway. Did you hear Dr. Nyland testify that he found positives?
I did.
Doesn't the word consistent there mean they're all negative? How is a positive from him consistent with negatives from the other?
I don't know.
All right. Do you agree that's very misleading, isn't it?
I wouldn't say it's misleading. I'd say I don't know who put that comment in there.
Dr. Clottens, do you know?
That would have been an assessment by the CFIA, an assessment of all the information we had gathered to date, and an assessment of whether those findings were true positives or false positives. And also in terms of the negative testing, how confident we could feel in that.
Let me go back to the question of the Fraser River fish. Do you not see that issuing this statement when you're fully aware that there are positives also in the Fraser River is misleading to the Canadian public?
I have to disagree. As I said, we do the interpretation of the test results. We know the PCR test is not a perfect test. Indeed, in some of those 48 samples of the kidneys that we obtained from Dr. Miller's lab, those were in good condition and they did test negative. The gills were variable results. In terms of Dr. Nyland's results, he could not replicate his findings, and we considered them negative at this time.
You defined them as negative, but
yeah.
You were fully aware when the statement was put in that Dr. Nyland would not have said that they were consistent with a statement that they were all negative?
Dr. Nyland reports on the ability of the test or his testing results as they were done in the laboratory. After laboratory tests are done, then the interpretation of the test results need to be evaluated, and it's done by, in our case, by the CFIA, as we are legislated to make that determination. So even in veterinary medicine, when we get test results, it is not the laboratory that makes the determination of the disease or not. They tell us under their protocols, they believe the tests are positive or inconclusive, and then the clinician makes the decision, the interpretation on what those test results actually mean to the patient.
Can I have agriculture tab 59? Mr. Stephen, you were present at a press conference, and so were you, Dr. Wright, on November 8th, 2011. This document is a transcription of that news conference. Can I just ask that that be made the next exhibit?
I think it is an exhibit. In a moment, I may be able to provide you with what we understand the exhibit number to be. It'll be on the Commission's list of documents. It should be exhibit 2035? 2030.
Perhaps we can have exhibit 2030, huh? Yes, thank you. It appears the same. Mr. Stephen, when you gave this press conference, you were aware of the positives that have been found in the Fraser River fish?
I'll repeat that I was aware of presumptive positives. We had not confirmed that in the National Reference Laboratory.
You chose not to share that with the media?
I'll repeat that we don't share presumptive positives in the normal course of business, no.
Can we have exhibit 2101 on the screen? Some email that you looked at on Friday, Dr. Clottens. It's dated October 19th, 2011, 3:35. The subject of this email is Dr. Kabenji's laboratory. Is it correct that as of October 19th, 2011, CFIA had already determined that one of the reactions it was going to have to this finding of positive results is to go and check Dr. Kabenji's lab?
Yes, it was one of the options on the table, that we would try to get some more information to help make a determination whether the results he got on the PCR test are true positives or false positives.
No, I didn't ask you if you were going to confirm his results. What I said was you were going to go and attack his credibility, the credibility of his lab. You were going to go and check his lab, weren't you?
I disagree.
You weren't going to go check his lab. That isn't what this email says?
Mr. Commissioner, in fairness to the witness, there are two different propositions there. One is attacking credibility, one is looking at the lab, and so perhaps in fairness to the witness, those could be asked in two parts.
Well, let me put it in the nicest possible way. You were going to go check the credibility of his lab.
We were going to go check the methodology, the PCR methodology.
You weren't going to go, well, we've seen a document. Some people have referred to it as an audit. I guess that's not the correct assumption. It's an attack on his lab's credibility, isn't it?
I disagree.
Already as of October 19th, that's within a couple of days of you having your first meetings to talk about what to do with this, you were going to go look at his lab's compliance. I think that's the term used in the email.
You mean the compliance with the biosecurity? The biocontainment? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, the email speaks for itself. I'll move forward. Dr. Kabenji had the temerity to announce positive test results, and the result, his lab is being analyzed by you. That's the outcome of all of this, isn't it?
Yes, the PCR methodology is being investigated.
And Mr. Stephen, I suggest to you that the federal government is going to try and take away his OIE certification as a punishment for this. Is that right? That's what you're going to do, isn't it?
I have no authority to do anything about his OIE certification.
I predict within the next 12 months, Canada will go after his credibility. Isn't that right?
I disagree.
We have Exhibit 2026 on the screen, please. While that's coming up, let me say the same thing, Dr. Cluttons. You're also now going after Dr. Miller's lab and her methodology, aren't you?
We will be assessing the methodology so we can get some idea of whether the results are true positives or false positives. And that hasn't been decided yet whether we're going to do that or not.
This was a press release issued by the CFIA on October 21st, the day after you found out about the Fraser River samples. Again, no mention of the Fraser River samples in there, is there?
Nope.
Now it says, in the second paragraph, federal officials are working closely with the Atlantic Veterinary College, which conducted initial testing.
Yes.
Cooperatively, you would say.
And it was cooperative. In terms of, we did talk to Dr. Kimengi whether there were any samples left from the 48 fish that we could corroborate his findings. We also asked that with the subsequent fish that he tested that were submitted by Alexander Morton, and he did provide us with the homogenate so we could do some corroborative testing.
So what work was he doing to assist you? Basically, other than you taking away his samples completely from him, how did he work closely with you?
So the other way he worked closely with us is to provide us with information on how he performed the testing and on the PCR methodology itself in terms of assessing whether it was a true positive or a false positive. I should also mention that I did invite Dr. Kibengi to be part of a network laboratory for the NAP, and so he could, if he was interested, he could provide testing for the National Aquatic Animal Health Program.
When did you do that?
I did that actually, I'll have to check my notes, but I believe it was on the 19th. Or it could have been on the 18th. I can't quite remember. I had a number of conversations with him over the couple of days.
you put up Exhibit 2104, please? Dr. Clottens, the other, before we get to that exhibit, the other thing you did very shortly after the press conference on October 17th was to go out and seize all of Dr. Rutledge's samples, right?
It was not seizure. It was a request for samples that we needed to help conduct our investigation.
You took all of his samples away from him, right?
No, not all of his samples. He had samples from 2009, 2010, and 2011. They were put under quarantine, and we did take all of his samples from 2011 and sent them to Moncton.
The quarantine, as a layperson understands it, is you put something in place so that it can't go in contact, in the case of humans, other people.
Yeah, so in the case, oh sorry.
So let me finish this question. He had frozen fish sitting in a lab. You put it under a quarantine order. Were you afraid that it was going to go out and contact other fishes?
The reason we put it under quarantine is to assist with our investigation, so that those samples would be available if we needed them for further testing.
You took all of his 2011 samples.
Yes, we did, and we sent it to Moncton.
And you've not given them back.
We're currently
Just answer the question. Have you given them back?
not yet at this date, and
Are you
nor have we.
Are you going to give them back?
That determination is still to be made. We've completed the documentation, and a veterinary inspector will make the decision whether to return them or not.
Well, and you're going to decide not to give them back, aren't you?
I'm not.
So then no person will ever be able to test these samples other than you. That's seizure by my definition.
No, I have not told you that we're not going to give them back.
You're going to make that decision after the commission stops hearing testimony, aren't you?
No.
He's requested them back.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Morton's requested her samples back.
Well, what happened there was she requested the samples back, but it was unclear which ones she wanted back. So we have requested further information.
You only got one, so let me just hold on. She only gave you one set of samples. How could it be unclear when she asked for samples back?
Actually, there were more than one set of samples, possibly. And that's not clear, because there was some indication that she was involved with the 48 samples that were part of Dr. Rutledge's samples, and then there were the samples that came from Harrison Creek and Weaver Creek. And those specimens were entirely homogenized by Dr. Kabengi, and that's what we received from Dr. Kabengi was a homogenates, so not the initial samples from Dr. Morton.
So let me just get clear in real terms what happened. Once this report was made, CFIA swept in and took everything Dr. Kabengi had, all the 2011 samples from Dr. Rutledge, and eventually all of the samples from Dr. Morton, and hasn't shared it with anyone else since. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct.
Now let's come to the November 4th email. You gave testimony about this on Friday, and I didn't really understand your answer, so I'd like to explore it again. According to this email, you were thinking at that time of prohibiting or advising labs in Canada that the CFIA did not want them to test any more wild fish. Now, why were you thinking that? Why was that a response to a positive finding?
It was an option I put forward, basically because we could not confirm chain of custody, and it would be more the same where we couldn't confirm results, and we already knew we were going to come out with a surveillance plan.
So what you're really saying is we don't want any more citizens testing fish. We want to be the only ones doing it.
We wanted to provide the oversight on that testing, yes, because we are, by legislation, the final arbiter of fish health status in Canada.
So let me just understand this chain of custody. By your definition, if anybody else samples for these fish, you've got chain of custody issues.
Yes, if they're not under oversight of CFIA.
And the only way you can get proper samples then is if CFIA samples.
Or we contract the sampling, but we provide the oversight.
But you're not presently sampling.
We're not presently sampling. We've got a surveillance plan under development.
And you never have sampled wild fish before this date?
No.
So, as I understand your rationale, we're in a little bit of a catch-22. Only things we sample will meet our test, and we're not going to sample anything. Isn't that the situation as of October 2011?
October 2011? That was October 2011, but now we're in December 2011, and I don't agree with your statement.
All right, well, as of October 2011, there was no sampling program for wild salmon in place by CFIA, was there?
Not at that time.
And when this memo was made by you, you were thinking about prohibiting other labs from sampling, from testing any samples by any other person other than you.
It wasn't a full-out prohibition, it was an advisement. And it was just an option that was not accepted.
Right, but you as the national manager, were actually contemplating that.
Yes.
And then you were found out you don't have the power to do it.
I did not determine whether I had the power to do it or not.
I thought you just told me that you don't have the power to do it.
No, I didn't say that.
All right.
Mr. Commissioner, I'd just like to point out that DFO has been testing wild fish in BC. It may not be as comprehensive as in scope as the surveillance plan that CFIA is developing now in consultation with us and others, but there has been testing of wild salmon in BC.
For ISA, Mr. Stephen, there's been testing of wild salmon?
Yes, that's right.
When?
Our Pacific Biological Station in Nanaimo Lab has been testing this year.
When? You mean Dr. Miller's testing?
No, not Dr. Miller's testing.
Who's testing?
The National Aquatic Animal Health Program laboratory in Nanaimo.
Before October 2011, for ISA?
Yes.
Who's been doing that testing?
I believe Dr. Kyle Garber from our National Aquatic Animal Health Laboratory program.
Prior to 2010, there'd never been any testing by the federal government, isn't that right?
I'm not aware of it, but I can't speak to what the Pacific Station has been doing prior to this year.
Well, except for 2004. 2004, the Pacific Biological Station did test wild fish for ISA, right?
There was a postdoctoral research project that's been reported on here already, yes.
And it found ISVv, at least in the opinion of the researcher, right?
I believe there's testimony been heard on that question, yes.
And you were aware of that?
I wasn't at DFO in 2004. I was at CFIA.
Yes, all right. Dr. Wright, were you aware prior to 2011 that ISVv had been found at the Pacific Biological Station?
No, I wasn't.
All right, let's turn to you, Dr.
I would just point out I wasn't working for DFO at that point either.
Well, let's find out who you told, Dr. Jones. You were aware of it in 2004 and 2005 and 2006. Did you advise your superiors of that?
That I was aware of exactly what?
Well, that Dr. Monica Benji had found ISVv in wild salmon.
Dr. Molly Kabengi had some PCR results that suggested the possibility of the viruses
Yes.
present.
Well, let's not get too deeply into the niceties. She had certain findings. Did you pass those up the chain of command?
I did. My colleague Garth Trax, a virologist, was aware and a participant in this research, and the manager of our diagnostic laboratory, who managed the fish health protection regulations in the lab, was also aware of these findings.
Well, and when this, when ISVv began to become somewhat controversial, and during the Cohen Commission hearings, you discussed those with your superiors at DFO?
Well, certainly after mid-October, we discussed the earlier findings, and it was obviously relevant that the documents be included at that point.
So when was, why hadn't you reported this, these reports to the Commission any earlier?
Well, as I gave evidence last week on Friday, that the findings were deemed to be not a positive finding. We were very critical of the need for a very high level of confidence in the information, and when you put it all together, we weren't comfortable that, we weren't convinced that this was ISVv.
Well, you say we. Dr. Molly Kabenji was convinced.
She may have been.
Yes. And so who do you mean by we?
We means collectively the staff in the fish health section at the Pacific Biological Station, which included Garth Traxon and Dorothy Keyser.
Did Stuart Johnson know about these findings?
I'm not sure he did. He wasn't working with DFO until much more recently.
Well, did you discuss those with him once this became controversial in October?
Yes, I did.
And was Sonia Succedo aware of this?
I'm not sure. I didn't mention it to Sonia Succedo.
Back in 2004, did you not talk to her about this?
I don't believe so. I don't recall speaking to her about this.
Well, why would DFO bury the results if they was simply something that was suspicious? Isn't that how science works?
Well, you know, this commission might be surprised to learn that much of what we do provides negative results. We're sitting on files of negative results. My computer is full of negative results. They don't get talked about or published. This is how it works.
This is significant, though. ISVv in wild salmon. Did you at least go and do more testing? Isn't that what scientists do when they have uncertain results? They test a bunch more salmon.
Well, scientists do a lot of things, and one of the most important things we do is be very critical of what we're finding. We have to be necessarily critical and skeptical, especially of unexpected findings, particularly when it relates to the occurrence for the first time of a highly virulent pathogenic organism in an area that's not been reported before. We have to be critical and skeptical.
But in the 2005 season, in the 2006 season, in the 2007 season, and on until DFO took over responsibility for aquaculture, DFO did not a single piece of research to sample wild salmon for ISVv. Is that your understanding?
I didn't ask specifically what... Kyle Garver was hired shortly after Molly Kabengi left and is now the research virologist. Garth Traxon and Kyle were both aware of the findings, and whether they chose to pursue a research program in ISVv, I gather they did not, but I didn't ask why they didn't.
So Dr. Garver was aware of these findings back in 2004 and 5?
Not that early. He was aware shortly after he started.
Okay, and so when he testified before this commission, he knew about these findings too?
He knew that there were findings that could not be repeated, that were not verifiable, and that, to our best opinion, did not represent the occurrence of ISA virus.
And so when he was answering questions, he didn't think that that was something relevant?
I don't know what Kyle was thinking.
Could I have document 2118 on the screen? We were asked this morning by counsel about, by Counsel for Canada about a document that had been come forward over the weekend. Did you discuss this document with counsel over the weekend?
Yes, I did.
Was it you that brought it to his attention?
This document was provided to me many weeks ago. It was provided into this process many weeks ago. It was provided probably mid-November, if not earlier.
But it was this weekend you chose to speak about it.
Well, no, I I've been speaking about this on several occasions, but it occurred to me that if it had not been entered into whatever the process is that brings it up on the screen, then perhaps it would be useful to do that.
Because you thought this statement about potential reagent contamination was something you wanted to rely on.
I think it's an important part of the puzzle. I think it's important to recognize the fact that we are inherently skeptical and critical, and that we rely on the highest level of confidence in the data. And any indication that casts doubt on the reliability of the data, I think, is important to be part of this discussion.
So the very researcher that was involved with this said there was a small possibility, and you chose to seize on it.
Well, we have to look at all of the information. We seize on everything we can and judge it as to whether or not it's valuable or not.
Can I go to page 24, please? Oh, sorry, the next page, 24 PDF. I think this is the conclusory part of the statement. Dr. Jones, did you read that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
In the middle, in bold, it says, I suppose this result rules out the possibility of reagent contamination. Mm-hmm. And isn't that because the strain that's found is different enough that it can't be from contamination if that strain doesn't exist before?
Well, his data indicates that the sequences that he found were not consistent with his positive control or with his controls, and therefore it rules out the possibility in this assay as a contamination.
Why would you tell the commissioner about this mention on page 13 to not point out the key conclusion?
This is an entirely different set of analysis. This is an examination of the segment 8 sequences. When people describe reagent contamination, it's a description of the possibility that's on a case-by-case basis. So what the earlier reference was made to was a reference to the possibility that in the 7th segment analyses, the data, there was a possibility that there was reagent contamination.
Well, I think I have to sit down. I'm out of time, but I want to just make sure I get at least one exhibit in. Aquaculture 14, please. Dr. Cluttons, or Mr. Stephen, have you seen this study from the senior provincial fish health biologist about the province's assessment of eggs and the health regulations? Have you seen that document?
I've seen the document when it was presented to the through the commission, yes.
Can I have that as the next exhibit, please?
Objects to this document being marked in as an exhibit. It's expert evidence with a proper foundation, and the witness's qualifications and CV have not been attached.
We'll submit the witness's qualifications, Mr. Commissioner, and the province has been putting in those kinds of documents all along. And just to ask a qualifications question of Dr. Cluttons, I think it's the email at Exhibit 2110.
I wonder if we could just briefly obtain, I suppose, an alphabet exhibit letter.
Document for ID TTT.
And document on it, Mr. Mcdade.
2110, I believe.
Thank you.
Mr. Barras, who this document, this email is from, Dr. Cluttons, he's the he was at that time the acting regional manager for CFIA.
I believe he was.
And he was the senior investigator on the West Coast in respect of your investigation?
He was the incident co-commander, yeah.
So this is the person he's obviously participating both in the public relations battle and in the investigation. And I just wanted to ask if you saw anything wrong with that.
I'm not going to comment on this email. It's not my email. And I can't speak to what Joseph was thinking at that time.
Aren't you his supervisor?
No. No, I'm not his supervisor.
And in regards to this issue, aren't you the senior person in charge of dealing with it?
No, I'm not.
Mr. Commissioner, I have next Council for Conservation Coalition with 25 minutes.